Most salespeople don't lose because their pitch is weak. They lose because the buyer never felt safe enough to say yes. But there's something that happens even before that. Something most people never talk about. They lose because they never gave themselves anyone to pitch in the first place. Their pipeline is empty. Their calendar is bare. And they're sitting there wondering why nothing's working. When the truth is, they stop doing the one thing that creates opportunity. If that hits close to home, don't go anywhere. This might be the episode that changes everything.
Welcome to the Sales Evolution Lab, exploring the science of selling, from past wisdom to future innovation.
Welcome back, my friends. I'm Mackie, and if you're here, you're someone who takes selling seriously. You're not looking for hacks. You're not looking for tricks. You're looking for something real, something you can feel in your bones, something that actually works, not just in theory, but in the trenches when the pressure's on and the stakes are high. That's what we do here. And today, we're going deep on a book that I believe every single person in sales needs to read. Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I first picked up this book, I thought I knew what I was getting into. Another prospecting book. Another guy telling me to make more calls. Another reminder that sales is a numbers game. And yeah, it's all of that. But it's also something more. Because Jeb doesn't just tell you what to do. He shows you why you're not doing it. He takes you inside the psychology of avoidance. He exposes the lies we tell ourselves. And he does it with stories that feel so real, so familiar, that you catch yourself nodding along, thinking, that's me. He's talking about me. That's rare. That's a book that doesn't just inform, it transforms. And it brought me back to a memory I haven't thought about in years. Let me take you there. I'm 20 years old, maybe 21. I'm selling personal training at Movati Athletics. And I'm having one of those stretches where everything is clicking. You know the feeling, when the words come easy, when people are saying yes before you even finish the sentence, when you walk into the gym and you know today's going to be a good day. I was on fire. I was closing deals left and right. I was putting up numbers that had people asking what my secret was. And somewhere in the middle of all that success, I made a decision. I decided I'd earned a break. See, prospecting is hard. It's emotionally draining. You're putting yourself out there over and over, and some days it feels like everyone's saying no. So when things are going well, when the pipeline's full and the deals are flowing, there's this voice in your head that says, you can ease off. You've got enough. Take a breath. And I listened to that voice. I stopped walking the floor looking for new conversations. I stopped following up with the leads I hadn't closed yet. I stopped doing the things that got me there in the first place. I told myself I was being smart, strategic. I told myself I was working on my existing clients, which was really just code for hiding from the hard work or finding new ones. And for a few weeks, nothing bad happened. The deals I'd already set up kept closing. The commission checks kept coming. I thought I'd figured out some kind of shortcut. I thought maybe I didn't need to prospect as hard as everyone said. But then the well started to run dry. The appointments on my calendar started thinning out. The phone stopped ringing. The people I was nurturing weren't calling back. And suddenly, I'm sitting in that gym, staring at an empty schedule with this sick feeling in my stomach. I remember looking around at the other trainers, hoping nobody noticed, hoping I could figure this out before anyone realized I'd fallen off. And you know what the worst part was? I didn't connect it to what I'd done. I didn't realize that the break I took 3 weeks ago was the reason I had nothing now. I thought something else had gone wrong. I thought maybe the leads were drying up. Maybe the economy was shifting. Maybe people just weren't buying personal training anymore. I blamed everything except the real culprit, which was me. which was the version of me from a few weeks earlier who decided to take his foot off the gas. That's the trap. That's the thing Jeb Blount exposes in this book. The results you're experiencing today aren't about what you're doing today. They're about what you did or didn't do weeks and months ago. And when you don't understand that, you end up in this cycle of confusion and frustration. You end up blaming the market, blaming the leads, blaming your manager, blaming your product, when the real issue is that you stopped filling the bucket. And when you stop filling the bucket, eventually it runs dry. Doesn't matter how good you are at closing. Doesn't matter how smooth your pitch is. If there is no one sitting across from you, there's no one to sell to. That lesson cost me. It cost me money. It cost me confidence. It cost me sleepless nights wondering if I was actually cut out for this. And I genuinely wish someone had handed me this book back then, because everything I learned the hard way. Jeb Blount lays out the clarity and compassion and zero BS. He's been there, he's lived it, and he's writing for people who are exactly where I was, talented enough to succeed, but stuck in patterns that kept holding them back. So here's what I want you to know before we dive in. If you've ever had a month where nothing closed and you couldn't figure out why, if you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still hearing, I need to think about it more than you'd like, if you ever caught yourself avoiding the phone, finding every excuse to not pick up and dial, if you've ever sat at the desk feeling busy all day, but knowing deep down you weren't actually productive, this episode is for you. This isn't about making you feel bad. This is about setting you free. Because once you understand the laws that govern your pipeline, once you really internalize why this happens, you can break the cycle. You can take control. You can build something predictable and sustainable and calm. By the end of today's episodes, here's what you'll walk away with. You'll understand the 3 universal laws that determine every salesperson's success or failure. You'll know exactly why the prospecting you do today won't show up in your results for 90 days, and why that matters more than almost anything else. You'll see the 3 psychological barriers that are secretly sabotaging your activity and how to overcome each one. You'll learn why the fear of cold calling is really just a disguise for something deeper, and how to reframe it in a way that sets you free. You'll get a practical framework for handling rejection that doesn't require you to be pushy or aggressive. And you'll have a toolkit you can use starting tomorrow, not next month, tomorrow, to fill your calendar, build your confidence, and take control of your results. This is going to be a long one. We're going deep. We're going to tell stories. We're going to sit with uncomfortable truths. And we're going to come out of the other side with something real. Something you can use, something that might just change the trajectory of your career. So settle in, turn off the distractions, and let's get into it. So let's start with the foundation, the thing everything else is built on. The idea that if you really internalize it, will change how you approach every single day in sales. Here it is. The number one reason salespeople fail is an empty pipeline. That's it. Not a weak close, not a bad pitch, not a tough territory, not a difficult market. An empty pipeline. And the reason the pipeline is empty, they didn't prospect enough. They didn't pick up the phone. They didn't knock on the door. They didn't send the message. They didn't show up. They didn't do the work. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Kyle, come on, that's obvious. Everyone knows you have to prospect. That's sales 101. Tell me something I don't know. And I get it. I really do, because I thought the same thing. But here's what Jeb taught me, and what I've seen proven over and over again in my own career. Knowing and doing are 2 completely different universes. There's a moment in his book where Jeb talks about something he calls the paradox of basics. And it stopped me cold. He says the real secret to sustained sales success is a truth so simple and so obvious that it becomes impossibly invisible to most salespeople. Impossibly invisible. Think about that phrase. The answer is right in front of us. It's so close, we can't even see it because we're too busy looking for something else, something sexier, something more sophisticated, something that doesn't require us to do the hard, uncomfortable, emotionally draining work of prospecting every single day. We live in an age of hacks. Everyone's looking for shortcuts, the secret funnel, the magic script, the AI tool that's going to do the work for us, the social selling strategy that means we never have to pick up the phone, the inbound marketing system that fills our calendars while we sleep. And look, some of that stuff works. Some of it genuinely useful. But none of it replaces the fundamental requirement of proactive prospecting. Jeb tells this story in the book that I can't get out of my head. He's working with a client, a big company, and the company is spending $1.2 million per month on inbound lead generation. Per month. Let that sink in. $1.2 million every 30 days on marketing, on content, on ads, on all the things that are supposed to fill the pipeline so salespeople don't have to prospect. And you know what? Even with all that investment, even with $1.2 million a month pouring into the top of the funnel, the sales reps were still idle more than half of the time. The leads weren't enough. The volume wasn't there. The only way they could hit their numbers was by making targeted outbound calls, by picking up the phone and interrupting people, by doing the thing everyone said was dead. That's the reality. That's what the gurus don't tell you when they're selling you their courses on how to never cold call again. The math doesn't work. Most companies, cannot generate enough inbound leads to keep their salespeople's pipelines full. And even the ones that can, even the ones that are spending a fortune on marketing, the highest value prospects, the biggest opportunities, the deals that can really change your year, those people aren't sitting around waiting for your content to find them. They're busy. They're being pursued by everyone. And the only way to get their attention is to reach out directly, to interrupt, to prospect. So why don't we do it? Why do smart, talented, capable salespeople let their pipelines run dry? Why do we avoid the one thing we know we're supposed to do? Jeb Blount has an answer, and it's not what you might expect. He introduces something called the universal law of need. And once you understand this law, you'll never think about selling the same way again. Here it is. The more you need a sale, the less likely you are to get it. Hear that again. The more desperately you need something, the less likely you are to get it. Think about a time when you really needed a deal to close, when your back was up against the wall, when the month was almost over and you were nowhere near your number, when you had one prospect left and everything was riding on them saying yes. How did that conversation go? How did you show up? What energy did you bring into that room? I'll tell you what happened, because it's happened to me more times than I want to admit. You showed up needy. You showed up desperate. You showed up with the invisible weight on your shoulder that the prospect could feel even if they couldn't name it. And they pulled away. They got uncomfortable. They said they needed to think about it. They asked you to send more information. They went dark. Jeb tells the story about a salesperson named Jerry. Jerry's prospecting was inconsistent. Some weeks, he'd be on fire, making calls, filling the pipeline. Other weeks, he'd slack off, get distracted, tell himself he had enough. And then a few deals fell through. Deals he was counting on. Suddenly, his pipeline was nearly empty. He had maybe a handful of real opportunities left, and everything was riding on them. Now, here's what happened when you're in Jerry's position. You become desperate, and desperation does something to you. It changes how you walk into a room. It changes the tone of your voice. It changes the questions you ask. It changes everything, Because when you need someone to say yes, you start doing things that push them away. You talk too much. You don't listen. You get pushy. You skip steps. You try to close before you earn the right. And the prospect feels it. They feel this pressure coming off you, this neediness, this energy that says, please, please, I need this. And something inside them recoils. Jeb describes it as a foul stench of desperation. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's accurate. We've all been on the other side of it. We've all had someone try to sell us something when they clearly need the sale more than we need the product. And it's uncomfortable. It feels like manipulation, even when it's not. It triggers our defenses. We want to get away. So Jerry's sitting there with his empty pipeline, desperately trying to close the few deals he has left. And every conversation goes sideways. Every prospect feels the pressure. Every opportunity slips through his fingers, and he spirals. His confidence craters. He starts doubting himself. He starts thinking maybe he's not cut out for this. When the truth is, he's actually good at selling. He's just put himself in an impossible position. He's triggered the universal law of need. And once that law kicks in, it's almost impossible to escape. Now, let me tell you about Sandra. Sandra works at the same company as Jerry. Same product, same market, same tools, but Sandra does something different. Sandra prospects consistently, every single day, no matter what. When she's busy, she prospects. When she's crushing it, she prospects. When deals are closing left and right and her calendar is packed, she still carves out time to add new opportunities to her pipeline. Because of that consistency, Sandra always has options. She's got over 30 opportunities in her pipeline at any given time. And when she walks into a sale conversation, she's not desperate. She doesn't need this particular deal to survive. She wants it. Of course she wants it. But she doesn't need it. And that changes everything. She's relaxed. She's curious. She asks better questions. She's listening more. She's willing to walk away if it's not a fit. And ironically, that makes people want to work with her more. Here's what happened to Sandra. Because she was consistent, because she always had a full pipeline, her sales results were predictable. She hit her numbers. Her manager trusted her. She wasn't stressed. She wasn't scrambling. She was calm. And then something interesting happened. A few deals she wasn't even counting on, long shots, opportunities she almost written off. They came through, closed unexpectedly. And suddenly, she's not just hitting her numbers, she's blowing past them. She's getting bonuses she didn't expect. Jeb calls this extra sales gravy. And here's the beautiful irony. Sandra got that gravy precisely because she didn't need it. She wasn't chasing it. She wasn't desperate for it. It just fell into her lap because she'd built a system that created abundance. And when you operate from abundance, good things happen. When you operate from scarcity, everything falls apart. So let me ask you something. Which one are you? Are you Jerry, riding the roller coaster, prospecting when you feel like it, then scrambling when the pipeline runs dry? Or are you Sandra, disciplined, consistent, always adding new opportunities, never letting yourself get into a position where you need any single deal to survive? Because here's the thing. You get to choose. Every single day, you get to choose. The actions you take today determine which person you become tomorrow. And the only way to escape the universal law of need is to build a pipeline so full that you never have to be desperate again. But there's a catch. And this is where it gets even more interesting. Because even if you understand all of this, even if you know that consistent prospecting is the answer, there's still something working against you. Something invisible, something psychological. And until you understand it, you'll keep falling into the same traps. That's where the first real shift begins. So, we've established the foundation. Prospecting is everything. And an empty pipeline is the number one killer of sales careers. And the universal law of need will destroy you if you let your pipeline run dry. But here's the question that haunts me. If we know all this, if it's so obvious, why do we keep making the same mistake? Why do talented salespeople who understand the game, people who've been doing this for years, still end up with empty pipelines? The answer is something Jeb Blount calls the 30-day rule. And understanding this rule changed how I think about time itself. Here's the rule. The prospecting you do in any 30-day period will pay off for the next 90 days. Let me say that again, because it's important. What you do today doesn't show up in your results today. It shows up 3 months from now. And what you didn't do 90 days ago, that's showing up in your results right now. I want you to picture this. Imagine you're a farmer, and today you plant a seed. You water it. You tend to the soil. But when you wake up tomorrow, there's no fruit. There's no harvest, just dirt. So you plant another seed, and another, day after day, and still nothing visible. No green shoots, no sign that anything is working. Most people quit right there. They look at the dirt and think, this isn't working. I'm wasting my time. But the farmer knows something they don't. The harvest doesn't come the day after you plant. It comes months later. And if you stop planting because you don't see immediate results, you guarantee that 3 months from now, you'll have nothing to harvest. That gap between the seed and the harvest is where most salespeople lose faith. They don't see green shoots, so they stop planting. And they wonder why their pipeline is empty. This is why sales feels so confusing sometimes. This is why you can be working hard and see nothing. This is why you can slack off and things still seem fine for a while. There's a delay, there's a lag, a gap between action and consequences that's just long enough to mess with your head. Let me tell you about Greg. Greg is a sales pro, good at his job, experienced, knows the product, knows the market. And in early March, Greg calls Jeb because he's frustrated. Nothing's closing. Deals are stalling. Prospects are going dark. He's doing everything he knows how to do, but the results aren't there. And Greg thinks he has a closing problem. He thinks something's wrong with his technique. Maybe his pitch needs work. Maybe the needs to handle objections. Maybe he needs to handle objections better. Maybe the market has shifted. But Jeb asks him one question, just one. What are you doing in December? What were you doing in December? And Greg goes quiet because he knows the answer. He knows exactly what he was doing in December. Nothing. Well, not nothing, but not prospecting. It was the holidays. Things were slow. Prospects weren't picking up the phone anyway. So he told himself he'd take a break. He told himself January would be a better time to ramp back up. He told himself he'd earned a little rest after a busy year. And now, 90 days later, he's paying the price. The March slump isn't a closing problem. It's not a technical problem. It's not a market problem. It's a December prospecting problem. The pipeline he should have built in December. That's the pipeline he needed in March. And it didn't exist because he didn't build it. This is the 30-day rule in action. And it's brutal because it's invisible. When you skip prospecting today, nothing bad happens today. You don't get punished immediately. The sky doesn't fall. The manager doesn't yell at you. In fact, you might feel relieved. You might even feel smart. See, I didn't need to make those calls. Everything's fine. But everything's not fine. The bill is just delayed. It's coming. And when it arrives in 60 days, in 90 days, you won't connect it to the decisions you made back then. You'll think something new went wrong. You'll think it's about what you're doing now. But it's not. It's about what you didn't do then. I'll live this. I told you the story earlier about my time at Movati Athletics. But let me go deeper. Let me tell you what it actually felt like. I'm 20 years old. I've been crushing it. Best numbers in the gym. People are asking me for advice. I'm feeling invincible. And I take my foot off the gas. Just for a little while. Just to catch my breath. A few weeks go by. Things still seem fine. The deals I'd already set up are closing. The momentum is carrying me. And I'm thinking, man, this is easy. I don't know why everyone makes such a big deal about prospecting. I'm doing great without it. Then the momentum runs out. And it doesn't run out slowly. It runs out all at once. 1 week I'm fine. The next week I look at the calendar and there's almost nothing there. And I remember this feeling, this cold sinking feeling in my chest, like I'd been caught, like I'd been exposed, like the thing I'd been pretending wasn't happening had finally caught up with me. I started scrambling, started trying to book appointments, started reaching out to people I should have called weeks ago. But it was too late. The hole was too deep. I couldn't fill it fast enough. And I had to sit there day after day watching the numbers drop, watching other people close deals while I had no one to talk to, watching my confidence crumble. The worst part, I didn't understand why. I thought I'd done something wrong recently. I thought maybe I'd lost my touch. I started questioning everything, my pitch, my approach, my ability. Maybe I just got lucky before. Maybe I'm not actually good at this. And that doubt is poison. Because when you don't trust yourself, it shows. It leaks into every conversation. And it makes the universal law of need even worse. Now, you're not just desperate for sales. You're desperate to prove you're still capable. And that desperation drives people away even faster. It took me a long time to connect the dots, to realize that my March crisis was created by my January vacation, to understand that the lag between prospecting and results is where most salespeople get lost. They're always responding to yesterday's weather. They're always reacting instead of creating. They're always one step behind because they don't understand how time actually works in sales. Here's what I want you to understand. When you're having a great month, that's not because of what you're doing now. That's because of what you did 60 to 90 days ago. And when you're having a terrible month, same thing. The results you're experiencing today are the harvest from seeds you planted or didn't plant months ago. This changes everything because it means you can't wait until you need opportunities to start creating them. By then, it's too late. The only way to ensure you always have a full pipeline is to prospect when you don't need to prospect when things are going well, to prospect especially when things are going well, because that's when you're most tempted to ease off. That's when the 30-day rule is setting its trap. Jeb tells his own version of the story in his book. Early in his career, he had a monster quarter, closed tons of business, felt like a superstar, and then he let himself get buried in administrative work, setting up the new accounts, handling customer issues, all the stuff that comes after the sale. Important stuff, sure, but not prospecting. 90 days later, he woke up to an empty pipeline. His manager was furious. He was depressed. He felt like a total failure. He went from hero to zero in what felt like overnight. But it wasn't overnight. It was a slow erosion that he couldn't see until it was too late. His manager gave him one piece of advice. Stop digging. Get on the phone. Start prospecting now. And Jeb did. He forced himself, even though he was depressed, even though he felt like nothing would work, even though every fiber of his being wanted to hide. He picked up the phone and started dialing. The first few days were brutal. Nothing was working. He was adding maybe one opportunity per day. It felt hopeless, but he kept going day after day, call after call, and slowly, the pipeline started to fill. His confidence started to return. His conversations started to improve. And by the end of that quarter, he wasn't just back on track. He was the number one sales rep in the region. Zero to hero, not because of talent, not because of luck, because he understood that when you're in a hole, the first rule is to stop digging and start climbing. And climbing means prospecting, always prospecting. even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. So here's the action from this first lesson. Write this down somewhere. You'll see it every day. Put it on a sticky note. Make it your phone wallpaper. Tattoo it on your brain. What I do today shows up 90 days from now. When you feel like skipping prospecting because you're busy, remember this. When you feel like taking a break because things are going well, remember this. When you tell yourself you'll ramp it up next month, remember this. The bill always comes due. The only question is whether you'll be ready for it. The salespeople who never have slumps, they're not luckier than you. They're not more talented than you. They're just more consistent. They prospect more when it's easy, and they prospect when it's hard. They prospect when they're winning, and they prospect when they're losing. They understand that the 30-day rule doesn't take days off, and neither can they. But here's the thing. Even when you understand the 30-day rule, even when you know you should be prospecting every day, there's something else going on. Something that's working against you. Something that makes you think you're being productive when you're actually not. And that's what we need to talk about next. There's a line in the book that hit me like a punch in the chest. And I want to share it with you now. You cannot be delusional and successful at the same time. Here's the problem. Most salespeople are living in delusion, not because they're dishonest, not because they're trying to fool anyone, but because they don't know their numbers. They don't track their activity. They don't measure what actually matters. And without that data, without that cold, hard, objective truth, they're making decisions based on feelings. And feelings lie, especially in sales, especially after rejection. Jeb tells this story that I think about all the time. He's in a sales bullpen working with a team, and he walks up to one of the reps in the middle of the afternoon. The guy looks frustrated, deflated. Jeb asks him how his day's going, and the rep starts venting. Awful, just awful. I've been hitting a brick wall all day. I've made easily 50 calls, and I can't get anywhere. These leads are garbage. Nobody's picking up. I don't know what's wrong. Easily 50 calls. That's what he said. So Jeb asked to see the call log, and the rep hesitates. There's this moment of resistance, but they pull it off. And you know what the number was? 12. 12 calls in 7 hours. Not 50, not even close. 12. Now, here's the thing that makes this story so powerful. The rep wasn't lying. He wasn't trying to decide. He wasn't trying to deceive anyone. He genuinely believed he'd made 50 calls. He would have bet money on it because it felt like 50. And here's why. 2 of his earlier calls that morning had been brutal, harsh rejections, people who were rude, people who hung up on him. And those rejections rattled him. They got inside his head. They disrupted his emotional equilibrium. And after that, every minute felt like an hour. Every call felt like 10. He was so emotionally exhausted from those 2 bad experiences that his perception of reality completely detached from actual reality. This happens all the time. It happens to all of us. We have a hard morning and suddenly we feel like we've been working forever. We get rejected a few times and we start to believe we've been rejected constantly. Our emotions hijack our perception. And without numbers, without objective data to anchor us, we drift into delusion. Jeb puts it perfectly. The false comfort of delusion is warm and fuzzy and far more inviting than the cold edge of reality. We'd rather believe we're working hard than facing the truth that we're not. We'd rather blame the leads than count the calls. We'd rather feel busy than be productive because delusion protects our ego. Reality threatens it. But here's the brutal truth. Delusion feels good in the moment. Reality feels good on payday. You cannot be delusional and successful. So pick one. So let me ask you something. And I want you to be honest with yourself. How many calls did you make last week? Not how many you think you made, not how many you feel like you made. How many did you actually make? Do you know? Can you look it up? Is there a record somewhere? Or are you just guessing? If you're guessing, you're probably wrong. And almost everyone is. Almost everyone overestimates their activity because our brains are wired to make us feel better about ourselves. That's just human nature. But human nature doesn't fill our pipelines. Numbers fill pipelines. Jeb compares salespeople to elite athletes, and this comparison changed how I think about my work. He says, imagine your favorite professional athlete. Could be anyone. Basketball player, baseball player, soccer star. Now imagine you walk up to them and ask about their stats. What happens? They don't hesitate. They rattle off numbers for days. Batting average, free throw percentage, goals per game, assists, rebounds, completion rate, time splits. They know everything, every metric that matters. Why? Because elite athletes understand that peak performance requires objective data. You can't optimize what you don't measure. You can't improve what you don't track. You can't make adjustments based on feelings. You need facts. You need numbers. You need the cold edge of reality. Sales is the same. You are a professional. Your performance can be measured. And if you're not tracking your numbers, you're not treating yourself like a professional. You're treating yourself like an amateur. And amateurs don't earn professional incomes. So what numbers should you track? Jeb keeps it simple. Track your activity metrics. How many dials you make. How many actually connect, meaning you reach a real person. How many conversations turn into appointments. How many appointments turn into sales. These ratios tell you everything. They tell you where you're strong. They tell you where you're weak. They tell you where to focus. Let me give you an example. Let's say you track for a month and you discover that you're making 50 calls a day, but you're only connecting with 5 people. That's a 10% connection rate. That's valuable information. Maybe you need to call at different times. Maybe your list quality is bad. Maybe you're not leaving effective voicemails. You can investigate, you can adjust, you can improve. Now, let's say your connection rate is fine. You're reaching people, but your appointment rate is terrible. Different problem. Now you know it's about what happens once you get someone on the phone. Maybe your opening is weak. Maybe you're not giving them a good reason to meet. Maybe you're talking too much and not listening enough. Again, you can investigate, you can adjust, you can improve. But if you're not tracking, you have no idea where the breakdown is. You're just flailing. You're trying different things randomly. You're hoping something works, and hope is not a strategy. I learned this the hard way too. When I was running my own fitness company, there was a stretch where I was convinced I was working harder than ever. I was exhausted, and at the end of every day, I felt like I was doing everything, and the revenue wasn't there. I started blaming external factors, the market, the competition, the economy, my team, everything except myself. Then I did something I should have done months earlier. I tracked my time for 2 weeks. Every hour, every activity, brutally honest. And what I found was embarrassing. I spent hours on email, hours on admin, hours on tasks that felt productive but weren't generating any money. The actual selling, the actual prospecting, maybe an hour a day, if that. I was the rep who made 12 calls and thought it was 50. I was the guy who felt busy because I was moving around, doing things, checking boxes, but I wasn't doing the things that actually mattered. And until I had the numbers in front of me, until I saw the reality instead of feeling the delusion, I couldn't fix it. Here's what I want you to do. Starting today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. I want you to start tracking. Get a simple system. Get a simple system. A notebook, a spreadsheet, a note app on your phone. It doesn't matter what you use. What matters is that you do it. Track 3 things. How many dials you make, how many conversations you have, how many appointments you set. That's it. 3 numbers every day. At the end of the week, look at your totals. Look at your ratios. Be honest with yourself. And I promise you, I promise you'll be shocked by what you learn. Either you're doing more than you thought, which is great news, or you're doing way less than you thought. And that knowledge is worth everything because you can't fix what you can't see. There's a formula Jeb uses in the book. Efficiency plus effectiveness equals performance. E plus E equals P. Now that can sound a little abstract, so let me give you a way to think about it. Imagine you're chopping wood. Efficiently is how many times you swing the axe. Effectiveness is how sharp the blade is. If the blade is dull, you have to swing 100 times to get through the log. If the blade is sharp, you might only have to swing 10. Same result, completely different effort. Tracking your numbers tells you which problem you have. Do you need to swing more, or do you need to sharpen the tool? Are you making enough calls, or are the calls you're making not working? Without data, you're just guessing. With data, you know exactly where to focus. When you know your numbers, you can optimize both. You can make more calls, and you can make better calls. You can increase your conversation. You can attack from both sides. And that's when the results start compounding. But here's the catch. Even when you know your numbers, even when you see the truth, there's still something working against you, something deeper, something psychological. It's the reason you're not making the calls you know you should be making. It's the reason you sit down to prospect and suddenly find yourself doing something else. It's the thing that's been holding you back this whole time, and we need to face it head on. All right. We've talked about the 30-day rule. We've talked about knowing your numbers. But now we need to go somewhere uncomfortable because understanding isn't the same as doing. And there's a reason you're not doing what you know you should be doing. There's something working against you, something inside you. And until we name it, until we drag it into the light, it's going to keep winning. Jeb Blount identifies 3 psychological barriers that stop salespeople from prospecting. He calls them the 3 Ps: procrastination, perfectionism, and paralysis from analysis. Let's break each one down. And let's be honest to ourselves about which ones are running the show. Let's start with one we all know: procrastination. The art of putting off until later what we should be doing now. You wake up in the morning, you know you need to make the calls. You've got the list ready. Your phone is right there. But instead of picking it up, you check your email. Just a quick look. I need to see if anything came in overnight. 20 minutes later, you're still in your inbox. So you go get another coffee. I'll prospect better if I'm caffeinated. You come back, you check your CRM. Let me make sure everything is organized. You update a few records, you respond to a Slack message, you look at your calendar, you check LinkedIn, you read an article someone sent you, and suddenly it's noon. You haven't made a single call. Sounds familiar? It should, because this is how most salespeople spend most of their days. Not selling, not prospecting, just doing other stuff. Stuff that feels productive, stuff that keeps them busy, stuff that lets them avoid the one thing they're actually supposed to be doing. Jeb admits in the book that he has, and I love this phrase, a PhD in procrastination. He tells a story about making a New Year's resolution to stop procrastinating. So he went out and bought a book called How to Stop Procrastinating. Good intention, right? Decisive action. Buy the book, read the book, fix the problem. Except the book sat on his bedside table for 3 years, unread, untouched, until he eventually sold it at a garage sale. I laughed out loud when I read that because I've done the same thing. We all have. We buy the course and never watch it. We download the app and never open it. We make the plan and never follow it because the same force that makes us put off prospecting makes us put off everything. It's not about the task. It's about us. Here's what's dangerous about procrastination. It feels harmless in the moment. Skipping one prospecting session doesn't feel like a big deal. 1 hour, 1 day. What difference does it make? But remember the 30-day rule. Those small decisions compound. One skip session becomes two. Two becomes a week. A week becomes a month. And before you know it, you're 3 months down the road with an empty pipeline wondering what happened. Jeb says something in the book that I've thought about every day since I read it. The cumulative impact of many poor decisions and slips in self-discipline and things put off until it's too late is what failure truly is. Failure isn't one big mistake. It's thousands of small ones. It's all the times you told yourself later, and later never came. It's death by 1,000 cuts, and each cut is so small you barely feel it until you bleed out. So, how do you beat procrastination? Jeb uses a metaphor that I love. He asks, what's the best way to eat an elephant? And the answer is, one bite at a time. You can't do all your prospecting for months in one day. It's impossible. And when you think of it as if this massive, overwhelming task, you freeze. You don't know where to start, so you don't start at all. But if you break it down, if you just focus on making the next call, the next one, then the next one, suddenly it's manageable. Suddenly it's doable. Suddenly the elephant doesn't look so big. The antidote to procrastination is action. Not motivation, not inspiration, action. You don't wait until you feel like it. You start. And often the feeling follows the action. Once you make the first call, the second is easier. Once you get a few done, momentum builds. But you have to start. That's the hard part. That's the part that separates professionals from amateurs. Now let's talk about the sneaky one, perfectionism. Perfectionism disguises itself as preparation. It tells you that you can't make the call until you've researched the prospect thoroughly. It tells you that your script needs to be perfect. It tells you that your CRM needs to be organized first. It tells you that you need to read one more article, watch more training videos, prepare one more thing before you're ready. And it all sounds reasonable, so responsible, so professional, but it's a lie. Perfectionism isn't about doing great work. It's about avoiding rejection, because as long as you're preparing, you don't have to face the possibility that someone might say no. So as long as you're getting ready, you're safe. The rejection can't hurt you if you never make the call. Jeb tells the story about two reps, Jeremy and Valerie. They work in the same office, same product, same leads, same everything, except their approach couldn't be more different. Jeremy is a perfectionist. He arrives in the morning and spends the first hour organizing his desk, getting everything just right. Then he opens his computer and starts researching prospects, deep research, LinkedIn profiles, company websites, news articles. He wants to know everything about everyone before he picks up the phone. Then he reviews a script, makes a few tweaks, practices out loud. Finally, he's ready. He makes a call, voicemail. He makes another call, voicemail. A few more, all voicemail. 3 hours have passed. He's made 7 calls. 7. He's frustrated. This isn't working. He grabs himself, heads out to the field, telling himself he'll have better luck in person. Meanwhile, Valerie shows up. She doesn't organize her desk. She doesn't spend an hour researching. She pulls up a list of prospects. She picks up the phone. She starts dialing. No drama. No elaborate preparation. Just action. In 1 hour, Valerie makes 53 calls. She reaches 14 decision makers. She gets 2 qualified appointments. Then she does it again. By the end of the day, she's talking to dozens of people, sets multiple appointments, and filled her pipeline. At the end of the year, Valerie earns nearly $100,000 more than Jeremy. Same company, same product, same opportunities, different results. Because one of them spent their time doing the work, and one of them spent their time getting ready to do the work. Jeb has this line that should be printed on a poster in every sales office in the world. Messy success beats perfection. Messy success beats perfect mediocrity every single time. I'll beat that rep who spends an hour researching each prospect. I'll beat them every day of the week. Not because I'm smarter, not because I'm more talented, because I'll make 50 calls while they're still preparing to make the first one. Here's the truth about perfectionism. All that research you're doing, most of it doesn't matter. Most of it won't help you in the conversation. Most of it is just you avoiding the things you're afraid of. You don't need perfect information. You need a conversation. And you can only get a conversation by picking up the phone. Now, I'm not saying preparation doesn't matter at all. Of course it does. But there's a difference between useful preparation and avoidance preparation. Useful preparation takes 10 minutes. Avoidance preparation takes all morning. And somewhere in your gut, you know the difference. All right. Last one. Paralysis from analysis. This is when you get so caught up in the what ifs that you can't move. What if they're busy? What if I catch them at a bad time? What if they're already talking to competition? What if my pitch isn't good enough? What if they ask a question I can't answer? What if they're rude? What if they hang up on me? What if I fail? The human mind hates uncertainty. So when you're faced with an action that has an unknown outcome, like making a prospecting call, your brain tries to fill in the blanks. It tries to predict what will happen. And because your brain's primary job is to keep you safe, it tends to predict the worst. It imagines all the ways this could go wrong. It shows you all the monsters that might be hiding in the darkness. And pretty soon, you're so scared of what might happen that you can't take the first step. Jeb tells the story from his childhood that stuck with me. He's 6 years old at summer camp, Athens Y camp, and he's learning to swim. He's done all the lessons. He's practiced the strokes. He's splashed around in the shallow end, and now it's time for the test. He jumps off the diving board into the deep end of the lake. He climbs up. He looks down. The water is dark. He looks cold. It looks deep. And his brain starts spinning. What if I can't swim when I get out there? What if I sink? What if I don't come back up? What if I drowned? He's frozen. He can't move. His legs won't work. And he starts pleading with the coach. Coach Poss, I'm not ready. I need more time. Can I go back to the shallow end? I don't think I can do this. Now, Coach Poss was known for something. When kids froze on the diving board, he did not negotiate. He did not give pep talks. He walked over and threw them in. Just picked them up and tossed them in the water. And Jeb sees Coach Poss walking towards him. And in that moment, he realizes what's about to happen. He's going in. The only question is whether he jumps in himself or gets thrown in. And the embarrassment of getting thrown in is worse than the fear of jumping. So he jumps. He hits the water. He panics for a second. But then his training kicks in. His arms start moving. His legs start kicking, and he swims. He makes it to the shore. He's alive. He did it. And after that, you couldn't keep him off the diving board. He jumped over and over again. Because once he's done it once he knew the monsters in the water weren't real, the fear lost its power. That's paralysis by analysis. It's your brain inventing monsters to keep you safe. It's your brain filling in the unknown with the worst case scenarios. And the only way to beat it is to jump. Not to think more, not to analyze more, not to prepare more, just to jump. Sometimes you need a Coach Poss. Someone who pushes you when you won't push yourself. Someone who doesn't let you negotiate with your fear. A manager, a mentor, an accountability partner. Someone who will make you do things you're afraid to do. But even if you don't have that person, you can be your own Coach Poss. You can recognize when you're paralyzed. You can see the what ifs for what they are. Stories, not reality. You can jump anyway. Here's the antidote to all 3 Ps. One call at a time. You don't have to prospect. You don't have to prospect all day. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know how it's going to go. You just have to make this call right now, this one, and then the next one, And then the next one, don't think about the 100 calls you need to make. Think about the one call in front of you. Make it and let momentum do the rest. But here's the thing. Even when you beat the 3 Ps, even when you pick up the phone and start dialing, there's still one more obstacle waiting for you. And it's the reason most salespeople give up. It's the thing that feels like the real enemy, and it's not. And understanding that changes everything. So let's talk about something that most salespeople don't want to discuss honestly. Cold calling. We've been told for years cold calling is dead, that it doesn't work anymore, that nobody picks up the phone, that social selling is the future, that inbound marketing has replaced the need to interrupt people, that we should be attracting prospects, not chasing them. And if you spend any time on LinkedIn, you've seen the posts. Cold calling is dead. Here's what works instead. Why I stopped cold calling and tripled my sales. The cold call is a relic of the past. It's time to evolve. And I get the appeal of that message. I really do. Because cold calling is hard. It's uncomfortable. It puts you in a vulnerable position. And if someone tells you that you don't have to do it anymore, that there's an easier way, of course, you want to believe them. But here's what Jeb says, and this is important. The argument that cold calling is dead is an inane argument focused on semantics. It's a distraction. It's a way for people to avoid the real issue. Because the real issue isn't whether you call a prospect cold or warm. The real issue is whether you're willing to interrupt. Let me explain what I mean. When you reach out to someone, anyone, who isn't expecting to hear from you, you're interrupting them. Whether you call them, whether you email them, whether you DM them on LinkedIn, whether you knock on their door, whether you walk up to them at an event, you're interrupting their day. You're taking their attention from whatever they're doing and directing it towards you. That's the essence of prospecting, interruption. And here's the truth that most people don't want to admit. The fear of cold calling isn't really about the cold part. It's about the interruption. It's about the vulnerability of reaching out to someone and potentially being rejected. It's about the possibility that they'll be annoyed or rude or dismissive. It's about putting yourself on the line and not knowing how it's going to go. That's what we're really afraid of. Not the temptation of the call, the act of interruption itself. Jeb tells a story that proves the point beautifully. He's working with a company that has a team of young, inexperienced sales reps. And they've been given what should be the easiest possible assignment. Call dormant customers. Not strangers, not cold leads, people who have already bought from the company, people who know the brand, people who have an existing relationship, the warmest possible calls you could imagine. And these reps, they were paralyzed. They made every excuse in the book. They planned to make a call. They organized their desk. They researched and prepared. They did everything except pick up the phone. And they exhibit the exact same anxiety that you'd expect from someone calling a complete stranger. Think about that. Those weren't cold calls. They were people who had already raised their hands, already said yes once, already trusted the company enough to buy. And the reps were still terrified because it was never about the coldness. It was about the interruption. It was about the fear of hearing no. So Jeb does what Jeb does. He sits down, he picks up the phone, he starts dialing. He doesn't overthink it. He doesn't prepare for hours. He just calls. 25 dials. He books 3 appointments, just like that. And the reps are watching this. They're seeing that it's possible, that the monsters they imagined weren't real, that the dormant customers weren't going to bite their heads off. And something shifts. They start calling. They start having conversations. And once they got over that initial fear, once they proved to themselves that they could do it, they became phenomenally successful. They generated $100,000 in weekly sales from that same list they've been afraid to call. The only thing that changed was their willingness to interrupt. I've lived this in my own career. When I started doing face-to-face fundraising, I was terrified, not of the cause. I believed in what I was raising money for, not of the people. I genuinely like talking to strangers. I was terrified of the interruption. Picture it. You're standing in a shopping center. People are walking by, minding their own business. They're going to grab lunch. They're running errands. They're checking their phones. And your job is to step into their path and ask for a moment of their time. That first day, every fiber of my being resisted. Who am I to bother these people? What right do I have to interrupt their day? They're going to be annoyed. They're going to be rude. They're going to think I'm one of those charity people. And you know what? Some of them were annoyed. Some of them were rude. Some of them looked at me like I had 3 heads. But most of them were fine. They either stopped and listened, or they politely said no and kept walking. And the ones who stopped, some of them became monthly donors. Some of them gave significant amounts. Some of them thanked me for approaching them. They were glad I interrupted because they cared about the cause. They just didn't know about it until I stopped them. That's when it hit me. The interruption isn't an imposition. It's an invitation. I wasn't bothering people. I was offering them an opportunity. I was offering them an opportunity to learn about something that mattered, an opportunity to make a difference, an opportunity that they wouldn't have had if I'd stayed silent and let them walk by. The same thing is true for whatever you're selling. If you believe in it, if it genuinely helps people, then you're not bothering them by reaching out. You're serving them. You're giving them the chance to solve a problem they might have. You're opening a door they might want to walk through. But you can't walk through it if you don't open it. And opening it requires interruption. Jeb tells another story that drives this home. He's working with a group of insurance agents, and these agents have been given a simple task: call their existing customers, people who had already bought cars and home insurance from them. The purpose of the call is to set an appointment to review their coverage and to see if there are gaps. Maybe they have an umbrella policy. Maybe there's a cross-sell opportunity. Simple, easy, low stakes. And these agents made every excuse imaginable. One of them actually said this to Jeb: I didn't sign up for cold calling. Cold calling. He called it cold calling. Calling his own customers. People who already trust him. People who already give him money. He called that cold calling. And Jeb politely explained that calling a current client was about as far from cold calling as Perth, Australia is from New York City. It's not even close. But in that agent's mind, it was the same thing because it involved picking up the phone and interrupting someone. And that's the part he didn't want to do. So let me ask you something. What are you avoiding? What calls are you not making? What conversations are you not starting? And what story are you telling yourself to justify it? Because here's what I've learned. Every story we tell ourselves about why we can't prospect is just a sophisticated way of saying, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid of being annoyed. I'm afraid of hearing no. I'm afraid of feeling vulnerable. And that's okay. That's human. That's normal. But it's not an excuse. The top performers in any sales organization aren't fearless. They feel the same fear you do. They just don't let it stop them. They pick up the phone anyway. They knock on the door anyway. They send the message anyway. They interrupt anyway. And because they're willing to do what others won't, they get results that others don't. Here's the reframe I want you to take away from this. Every time you avoid a prospecting activity, you're not protecting yourself. You're depriving your future self of opportunities. You're leaving money on the table. You're giving those opportunities to your competitors. You're choosing short-term comfort over long-term success. And every time you make a call, send an email, knock on a door, every time you interrupt, you're making a deposit in your future. You're building your pipeline. You're creating options. You're ensuring that 3 months from now, you'll have people to talk to. The interruption is not the enemy. The avoidance of interruption is the enemy. And once you accept that, once you make peace with the fact that prospecting requires you to be a little uncomfortable, everything changes. Jeb has this metaphor in the book that I think about all the time. He says salespeople are like horse riders. Horses can sense fear. They have the innate ability to feel when the person on their back is nervous, uncertain, lacking confidence. And when they sense that weakness, they take advantage. They start testing boundaries. They start doing what they want instead of what you want. They might even throw you off. But when a rider is confident, when the rider knows what they're doing, the horse falls in line. The horse respects the rider. The horse follows the lead. Prospects are the same way. They can sense fear. They can feel weakness. They can tell when you're not confident. And when they sense it, they take advantage. They give you brush-offs. They make excuses. They string you along. They don't take you seriously. But when you're confident, when you believe in what you're doing, when you approach them like a professional who has something valuable to offer, the dynamic shifts. They listen. They engage. They take you seriously. Confidence doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from action. It comes from repetition. It comes from making enough calls that you've seen every scenario. It comes from getting rejected enough times that rejection loses its sting. You can't think your way into confidence. You have to act your way into it. And that starts with being willing to interrupt. So here's the question I want you to sit with. Are you willing? Not are you comfortable, not are you excited, not do you want to? Are you willing? Because willingness is enough. You don't have to love prospecting. You don't have to look forward to it. You just have to be willing to do it. And that willingness, that choice to show up and do the hard things, even when you don't feel like it, that's what separates the people who build careers from the people who flame out. But here's the good news. Once you're willing to interrupt, there are things you can do to make those interruptions more effective. There are words you can use, frameworks you can follow, psychology you can leverage. And that's where we're going to explore next. So, you've made peace with the interruption. You've decided you're willing. You're going to pick up that phone. You're going to knock on that door. You're going to send that message. Now what? What do you actually say? This is where a lot of salespeople get lost. They psych themselves up to make the call. They finally dial. Someone picks up. And then they fumble. They ramble. They don't get to the point. They make it weird. And the prospect hangs up, politely confused about what just happened. Jeb has a framework for this. And at the heart of it is one simple word. Because. There's a landmark study that Jeb references in the book. It was conducted by a psychologist, Ellen Langer, and it reveals something fascinating about human behavior. Here's the setup. Researchers had people try to cut in line at a copy machine. You know, one of those office copiers where there's always a queue. And they tested different approaches. In the first approach, the researcher simply asked to cut in line. Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine? Not a reason given, just a request. And about 60% of the people said yes. That's actually pretty good. People are generally accommodating. But then they tried a second approach. Same request, but with a reason. Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine because I'm in a rush? Now, that's a valid reason, right? Being in a rush is something we can understand. And compliance jumped to 94%. That's a huge increase just by adding a reason. But here's where it gets really interesting. They tried a third approach. Same request, but with a nonsensical reason. Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine because I have to make copies? Think about that. Because I have to make copies. That's not a reason. That's just restating the obvious. Of course you have to make copies. That's why you're at the coffee machine. That's why you're at the copy machine. It's circular logic. It's basically meaningless. And yet, compliance was 93%, almost as high as when they gave a real reason. What does this tell us? The word because, the act of giving a reason, any reason, was more powerful than just reason itself. Our brains are wired to respond to the word. When people say because, something clicks. We feel like we understand. We feel like there is a justification, and we're more likely to comply. If that psychologist calls a click-where response, it's what psychologists call a click-where response, like a tape recorder that starts playing automatically when you press the button. Our brains hear because, and they bypass the normal gatekeeping process. Instead of critically evaluating whether the request makes sense, we skip straight to the part of the brain that looks for logic and justification. And when it hears because, it says, oh, there's a reason. That's fine. Proceed. It's almost automatic, and it's incredibly powerful if you know how to use it. Now let's apply this to prospecting. When you reach out to someone, when you interrupt their day, they have a natural resistance. They're thinking, why is this person calling me? What do they want? Why should I give them my time? And if you don't answer those questions quickly, they tune out. They brush you off. They hang up. But if you give them a because, if you give them a reason, even a simple one, that resistance drops. They feel like the call makes sense. They're more likely to listen. They're more likely to engage. Jeb breaks down a simple 5-step telephone framework that puts this into practice. And I want you to pay attention because this is something you can use on your very next call. Step 1 is to get their attention. Use their name. Hi, Sarah. That's it. Their name cuts through the noise. It signals that this isn't a robocall. It signals that you know who you're calling, and it gets them to focus. Step 2 is to identify yourself. Say who you are. This is Kyle from Movati Athletics. Quick, clean. Don't ramble about your company's history or your title or anything else. Just who you are and where you're from. Then step 3 is to state the reason for your call. This is where you use because. The reason I'm calling is because. I'm reaching out because. I want to connect because. Fill in the blank with something relevant to this. The reason I'm calling is because we help businesses. The reason I'm calling is because we help business owners reduce their overhead. I'm reaching out because I notice your company just expanded into a new market. I wanted to connect because you're in the same industry as several of our clients. It doesn't have to be brilliant. It just has to be a reason, a because, something that makes the call make sense. Step 4 is to bridge to what's in it for them. This is where you connect your reason to their potential benefit. And I thought it might be worth a quick conversation to see if we could help you the same way. And I've got some ideas that might be relevant to what you're working on. And I wanted to see if it made sense for us to talk. And then step 5 is to ask for what you want, then shut up. This is crucial. Make your ask clearly and confidently, and then stop talking. Do you have 15 minutes next Tuesday or Wednesday to chat? Then silence. Let them respond. Don't fill the space. Don't keep talking. Don't undermine your own request by rambling. Ask and wait. That's it. 5 steps, 10 to 15 seconds, get their attention, identify yourself, state your reason with because, bridge to their benefit, ask for what you want. Done. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Kyle, that sounds too simple. There has to be more to it. And you're right. There's nuance. You'll adapt it to your style, your industry, your prospect. But the core framework works because it respects the prospect's time while giving them a clear reason to engage. When I was doing door-to-door fundraising, I learned the same principle, though I'll be honest, my approach didn't follow the exact formula. It was messier, more human, but it worked because it hit the same notes in a different way. Let me tell you what I actually say when someone opens the door. Someone answers and I say, "Hey, so nice of you to answer the door." And if they're smiling, I'll add, "And with such a big smile." Or if they got a beard, I'll say, "Always good to have a bearded brother on the other side of the door." Then I continue with, "My name's Kyle. I'm just coming around with this charity. I know you're probably busy doing something, but I was just hoping to ask 2 quick questions." Now, does that fit Jeb's 5-step model perfectly? Not exactly. But let me break down why it works. First, I acknowledge them. So nice of you to answer the door. That's not a throwaway line. It's genuine. Most people knocking on the doors launch straight into their pitch. By acknowledging them first, by making it about them, not me, I'm already different. I'm already human. Then I personalize it. The smile comment, the bearded comment, whatever I notice. This signals that I'm actually seeing them, not just running a script, not treating them like a number. I'm present, I'm paying attention, and people respond to that. Then I introduce myself and give context. My name is Kyle. I'm coming around with this charity. Simple, clear. They know who I am and why I'm there. Then I acknowledge their reality. I know you're probably busy doing something. This is huge. It shows respect. It shows I'm not oblivious to the fact that I'm interrupting their evening. It lowers their defenses because I'm not pretending this is a normal conversation. I'm acknowledging the truth of the situation. And then I make a small ask. But I was just hoping to ask you 2 quick questions. Not, can I tell you about the charity for 20 minutes? Not, do you have time for a presentation? Just 2 quick questions. That's manageable. That's low commitment. That's easy to say yes to. So while it doesn't follow the exact 5-step model, it hits the underlying principles: acknowledgement, personalization, context, respect for their time, a small, manageable ask. The point isn't to memorize a script. The point is to understand the psychology. People need a reason to engage. They need to feel seen. They need to feel like you respect their time, and they need an ask that doesn't feel overwhelming. Whether you're on the phone or at the door, whether you're selling personal training or raising money for charity, the principles are the same. Give them a reason, make it human, and ask for something small enough that saying yes is easy. The good news is, once you have an approach that feels natural to you, the anxiety around prospecting starts to decrease. You're not making it up as you go. You're not wondering what to say. You have your version of the framework, and that creates confidence. But even with the best opening, even with a perfect approach, you're still going to hear no. You're still going to face rejection, brush-offs, people who aren't interested. And how you handle those moments determine whether you succeed or flame out. And that's what we need to talk about next. Let's talk about rejection. Because if you're going to prospect, I mean really prospect, consistently, day in, day out, you're going to hear no. You're going to hear it a lot. And how you handle that no determines everything. Most salespeople collapse at the first sign of resistance. Someone says, "I'm not interested." And they say, "Okay, thanks for your time," and hang up. Someone says, "Send me some information." And they say, "Sure, what's your email?" And that's the end of it. Someone says, "Call me back next month." And they put in their calendar and hope for the best. And here's the thing. Most of those rejections aren't actually real. Most of those no's aren't final. They're just reflexes, automatic responses, scripts that people use without even thinking. Jeb Blount introduces something in his book that changed how I think about resistance. He calls it the RBO framework. RBO stands for reflex responses, brush-offs, and objections. And understanding the differences between these 3 things is critical. So let's start with reflex responses. Let me tell you a story from the book that I love. Jeb walks into an office supply store. He's looking for a specific cord. A nice young employee walks up and says, "Can I help you?" And without thinking, Jeb says, I'm just looking. He walks away. And then he catches himself. Wait a minute. I'm not just looking. I'm here for a specific thing. I actually do need help. So he goes back and asks the employee for assistance. I'm just looking. He said it automatically, without thinking. It wasn't true. He wasn't just looking. But it came out anyway. Because it's a script, a reflex, a conditioned response that we've all learned to use when salespeople approach us. Now, in your world, they don't say, I'm just looking. They say, we're all set, or send me an email, or not a good time. But it's the exact same muscle memory. It's a reflex, not a reality. They're not actually evaluating your offer. They're just running their default script to end the conversation before it starts. You call someone. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you want. And before you even finish your opening, they say, I'm not interested. We're all set. Now's not a good time. We've already have someone. These are reflex responses. They're not real objections. The prospect doesn't actually know if they're interested because they haven't heard what you have to say yet. They're just using their default script to get you off the phone. It's automatic. It's unconscious. It doesn't mean anything. And here's the mistake most salespeople make. They treat reflex responses like they're real rejection. They take it personally. They think, well, they said they're not interested, so I guess they're not interested. And they give up. But the person who said, I'm not interested, didn't actually consider your offer. They were just trying to end the conversation before it started. And if you let them, you've lost before you even had a chance. Then there's brush-offs. And brush-offs are a little different. They're more deliberate. The prospect has heard a bit of what you're saying, and they're trying to get rid of you. Send me some information. Call me back in a few months. I'll think about it and get back to you. Email me and we'll set something up. These aren't reflex responses. There's a little more thought behind them, but they're still not real objections. They're not saying your price is too high, or we've had a bad experience with your company, or I don't see how this addresses our needs. They're just trying to end the conversation without directly saying no. It's a polite way of brushing you off. And here's what most salespeople do. They take the brush off at face value. Great, I'll send you some information. What's your email? They send the info. They follow up in a few months, and nothing happens because the prospect was never going to read that information. They were never going to take that meeting. They just wanted you off the phone. And lastly, objections. Now, objections are different. Real objections are specific concerns. Your price is too high. We're under contract with someone else. I don't think this fits our needs. We've tried something like this before and it didn't work. These are real. They require responses. They're an actual barrier between you and the next step. But here's the thing. Most of what you hear in prospecting isn't objections. It's reflex responses and brush-offs. And if you can learn to handle those, if you can learn to push past them, you'll get more opportunities than you ever thought possible. Now, here's the RBO turnaround framework. Jeb teaches a 3-step process for turning around reflex responses and brush-offs. It's simple, it's effective, and it's not pushy or aggressive. It's anchor, disrupt, ask. So step 1, anchor. When you get hit with a reflex response or brush-off, your emotions spike. You feel rejected, your brain goes into a fight or flight. You want to retreat. You want to apologize and hang up. The anchor is a simple statement that gives your logical brain time to catch up. Something like, that's exactly why I called. I completely understand. That makes total sense. It doesn't have to make perfect sense. It's not really for your prospect. It's for you. It's a pattern interrupt for your own nervous system, a way to pause before you react, a beat to regain your composure. Then step 2, you disrupt. This is where you say something unexpected, something that breaks the pattern. The prospect expects you to argue. They expect you to push back. They expect you to be like every other pushy salesperson they've ever dealt with. So you don't do that. Instead, you agree. You validate. You say something that makes them go, Wait, what? That makes total sense. Most people aren't interested when I first call. I understand completely. You probably get calls like this all the time. That's fair. If I were in your position, I'd probably say the same thing. It disarms them. They were bracing for a fight. They had their defenses up. And when you don't fight, when you actually agree with them, those defenses drop. They're suddenly curious. They're willing to listen. And then step 3, ask. Once you've disrupted the pattern, you ask for what you want again. Confidently, assumptively, not apologetically. The reason I was calling is because we've helped companies like yours reduce their costs by 20%. I'd love just 15 minutes to see if there's something here. How's Tuesday looking? That's it. Anchor, disrupt, ask. Let me give you an example of how this flows. You call. The prospect says, I'm not interested. And you say, that's exactly why I called. Most people aren't interested when they first hear from us. And I get it. You probably get calls like this all day. But the reason I'm reaching out is because we've worked with a few companies in your space and helped them cut their procurement costs significantly. I'm not trying to sell you anything today. I just want to see if it's worth a conversation. Would you be open to 15 minutes next week? Notice what you didn't do. You didn't argue. You didn't get defensive. You didn't try to overcome their objection with logic and evidence. You just acknowledged it, diffused the tension, and asked again. Jeb describes this as verbal judo. In judo, you don't meet force with force. You redirect your opponent's energy. You use their momentum against them. You win without fighting. Same thing here. You're not overcoming the prospect. You're not defeating them. You're redirecting. You're pulling them towards you instead of pushing against them. And that feels completely different to them. I use this constantly in fundraising. Someone would be walking by and I'd approach them. They'd say, not today, mate. And instead of letting them go, I'd say, totally get it. Most people say that when I first try to stop them. And I know you're busy, but can I ask you just one quick question? And I'd ask my question. And more often than not, they'd stop. They'd engage because I didn't accept the brush off as final. I acknowledged it. I gave them an out, and then I gave them a reason to stay anyway. Here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to understand. The first no is almost never the real no. It's usually just the door creaking open. Your job is to gently push through, not retreat. Now, there's a balance here. You don't want to be obnoxious. You don't want to badger people. There's a point where you've made your case and they've genuinely said no. You need to respect that. But most salespeople never get to that point. They give up way too early. They treat the first brush off as final, when it really is just the beginning. So here's your takeaway. Practice the RBO turnaround. Anchor, disrupt, ask. Write it down. Role play it. Use it on your next call. Because the ability to handle rejection gracefully, to keep the conversation going when most people would fold, that's a superpower. And it's completely learnable. But here's the thing. Even with all these techniques, even with the best frameworks and the smoothest approach, there's still one more challenge. And it's the one that determines whether you can sustain this over time. It's about how you structure your day, how you protect your most valuable resource. And it might be the most practical lesson in this entire book. So let me ask you something. How much time did you spend prospecting yesterday? Not how much time did you spend at work, not how much time did you spend selling. How much time did you spend actively reaching out to new opportunities, dialing the phone, sending personalized emails, knocking on doors, actually prospecting? If you're like most salespeople, the honest answer is uncomfortable. Maybe an hour, maybe less. Maybe you can't even remember, because here's what happens. You show up to work with good intentions. Today's the day. You're going to hit the phones. You're going to fill the pipeline. You're going to be a prospecting machine. And then you check your email. Just a quick look, see if anything came in. 20 minutes later, you're still there, responding to things, forwarding things, getting stuck, responding to things, forwarding things, getting sucked into a thread that has nothing to do with your sales. You come up for air. Okay. Now you come up for air. Okay. Now you'll prospect. But first, coffee. You chat with your colleagues on the way. You catch up on what's happened over the weekend. You check your phone, you look at the news, you scroll LinkedIn. Then there's a meeting. Had to be there. Company update, pipeline review, team sync, takes an hour. Could have been an email. You get out. It's almost lunch. You'll prospect after lunch. Afternoon comes. You've got a client call, then some paperwork. Then you need to update your CRM. Then you respond to more emails. Then it's 4:30 and you're exhausted. And you tell yourself, tomorrow will be different. And nothing happened. Another day, no prospecting again. This is how most salespeople spend most of their days. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, but because they never protected their prospecting time. They let everything else eat it. Jeb Blount introduces something in this book that I think is one of the most important concepts for any salesperson to understand. Golden hours. Golden hours are hours when you can actually reach prospects. When people are at their desks, when people are picking up their phone, when they're checking emails, when you have the highest probability of connecting with them. For most B2B salespeople, golden hours are roughly between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. But it's even more specific than that. The best windows are usually first thing in the morning before people get sucked into their day, and late afternoon when things are winding down. Those are the times when you're most likely to actually reach someone. Now, here's the problem. Golden hours are also the hours when everything else is trying to steal your attention. Meetings happen during golden hours. Emails come in during golden hours. Admin work expands to fill golden hours. Colleagues want to chat during golden hours. Your managers want updates during golden hours. And if you don't fiercely protect your golden hours, they disappear every single day without you even noticing. Jeb tells a story about a VP who was at his wit's ends. His inside sales team was supposed to make 50 calls a day. That was the expectation. And they were averaging less than 2 calls per hour. 2. In an 8-hour day, they should be making hundreds of calls. They were barely cracking 20. They had every excuse. The CRM is slow. The lists aren't good. I need to research before I call. I had meetings. There was a customer's issue. The usual stuff. So Jeb did an experiment. He gave them 10 minutes to pull up a list of 50 prospects. Just names and numbers. No elaborate research, just a list. Then he said, you have 30 minutes. Call 25 of them. Go. That's it. 30 minutes, 25 calls, no emails, no CRM updates, no distractions, just dial. In that 30 minutes, they averaged 22 dials. They spoke to multiple people. They set at least one appointment. More activity in 30 minutes than they'd been doing all day. What changed? Not the team, not the product, not the leads, the constraint. This is Horstman's corollary to Parkinson law. Parkinson law says work expands to fill the time available. Give yourself a day to do something, it takes all day. Horstman's corollary says the opposite is also true. Work contracts to fit the time you give it. Give yourself 30 minutes, it gets done in 30 minutes. When those reps had all day to make 50 calls, they made 20. When they had 30 minutes to make 25, they made 22. The time pressure forced focus. It eliminated the drift. It made prospecting the only thing they could do. Jeb tells another story about commercial insurance reps. Same principle. They were averaging 7 telephone prospecting calls during a 1-hour block. 7. That's almost 9 minutes per dial. What were they doing for those 9 minutes between calls? Updating CRM, checking email, researching the next prospect, getting distracted, just drifting. The next day, after training, they implemented a simple concentration of power. Phone blocks. When you're in a phone block, you do nothing but dial. No email, no CRM, no research, no phone checking, just calls. You make notes on paper and update the CRM later. The results? They went from 7 calls an hour to 47. 47, same rep, same list, same phones. Different approach. This is the power of time blocking. It's not just about efficiency, it's about protecting your golden hours from the thousands of things that want to steal it. He calls email the greatest time sucker of the 21st century. And he tells the story narrated like a nature documentary, which I love, about the typical sales rep. Picture it. A rep arrives in the morning, sits down at his desk, takes a sip of coffee, and then dives headlong into email. What's in here? A message from the boss. Better respond to that. A customer question. Need to check on an order. A newsletter. That looks interesting. A link to an article. Let me just watch this real quick. 3 hours later, the rep is still there, mirrored down, going nowhere, feeling busy, achieving nothing. And here's the thing about email. It rarely contains good news. It rarely contains opportunities. It mostly contains other people's priorities, other people's problems, other people's demands on your time. And the moment you open it, you're reacting. You're on defense. You're serving everyone else's agenda instead of your own. The fanatical prospector, they don't check email first thing in the morning. They block the first hour or two for prospecting, pure prospecting, phone calls, outreach, pipeline building. And only after they've done their most important work do they open the inbox. Because when you open email first, you're starting your day with distraction. You're starting your day with other people's priorities. You're starting your day in reactive mode, and you never get out of it. Jeb also talks about mobile phones, the ding, the buzz, the notification. Every time your phone lights up, it steals your attention. It takes time to get that attention back. Studies show it can take up to 20 minutes to fully refocus after an interruption. He tells the story of watching a rep named Laura during a 2-hour prospecting block. She lost her focus more than 11 times due to phone notifications. 11 times in 2 hours. She'd pick up the phone, check the message, put it down, try to refocus, get pulled away again. By the end, she achieved a fraction of her activity target. She blamed the targets for being unrealistic, for realizing that she'd sabotaged herself. Here's the thing. Our phones are designed to be addictive. The people who build these apps hire psychologists to make them irresistible. Every notification is engineered to trigger a dopamine response, to make you want to check, to make it almost impossible to not check. And if you don't defend against that, if you don't turn off the notifications, put the phone in a drawer, or do whatever you need to do, eliminate this distraction, you will lose. You will always lose because you're fighting against billions of dollars of research designed to capture your attention. So here's what I want you to do. This week, implement time blocking. Pick a time. Morning works best for most people. Block 1 hour. Put it in your calendar. Treat it like an appointment you cannot miss. And during that hour, do nothing but prospect. Phone on silent. In another room if you have to. Email closed, not minimized. Closed. No CRM updating. No research. Just calls. At the end of the hour, look at what you accomplished. I guarantee it will be more than you typically do in a full day of prospecting. And then do it again the next day and the next. Make it a habit. Make it non-negotiable. Make it the foundation of your day. Jeb tells the story about an entrepreneur named Phil who taught him a lesson he never forgot. Jeb was proud of himself for spending 2 days doing his own home repair. Changed some plumbing, fixed some electrical, saved himself $150 by not hiring a contractor. Phil asked him to do some math. Jeb's salary at the time was $75,000. Divided by 48 working weeks, that's about $1,500 a week. Divided by the 30 golden hours per week, real selling hours, that's about $52 an hour. So Jeb spent 12 hours on repairs at $52 an hour. That's $624 worth of his time to save $150. He didn't save money. He lost money because he spent high value time on low value work. The same thing happens every day in sales. Every hour you spend on email during golden hours is high value time wasted. Every hour you spend on admin instead of prospecting is money lost. Every hour you spend on anything other than the activity that directly creates revenue is an hour you'll never get back. Know your worth. Calculate your hourly rate, and then ask yourself if what I'm doing right now is worth that rate. If not, stop doing it, or do it during non-golden hours, or delegate it, or automate it, but don't let low-value work steal your high-value time. The salespeople who earn the most, they're not smarter than you. They're not more talented than you. They're just figuring out how to protect their golden hours, how to concentrate their power, how to do the right thing at the right time. And because of that, they produce more in less time. And they do it consistently every single day. So here's your action. Block your time. Protect your golden hours and treat prospecting like non-negotiable. Because everything else, your confidence, your pipeline, your income, your career flows from that single discipline. And if it's avoidance, stop. Pick up the phone. Make the call. Messy action beats perfect inaction every time. When you catch yourself paralyzed, running what-if scenarios, imagining all the ways it could go wrong, ask, what's the worst that can actually happen? And then do it anyways. Jump off the diving board. The monsters in the water aren't real. The only way to find out is to jump. Number 4, you need to time block your prospecting. This might be the most practical thing to do. Schedule your prospecting. Put it in your calendar. Treat it like an appointment you cannot miss because it's the most important appointment of your day. Minimum 1 hour. First thing in the morning is ideal. Before you check email, before you do anything else, before the world has a chance to steal your attention. During that hour, phone on silence, notifications off, email closed, no CRM updates, no research, just calls. You'll be amazed at what you can accomplish in one focused hour. More than most people accomplish in a full day of scattered activity. Next up, use the 5-step framework. When you call, keep it simple. Don't overthink it. Don't try to be clever. Just be clear and confident. First, get their attention. Use their name. Hi, Sarah. Step 2, identify yourself. This is Kyle from whatever company you're from. Step 3, state your reason with a because. The reason I'm calling is because. Step 4, bridge to what's in it for them. And I thought it might be worth a quick conversation to see if it could help. Step 5, ask for what you want. Do you have 15 minutes next Tuesday? Then shut up, wait, and let them respond. 10 seconds. That's all it takes. Clear, confident, direct, respectful of their time. Then, number 6, master the RBO turnaround. When you get a reflex response or a brush off, I'm not interested. Send me more information. Now's not a good time. Don't fold. Anchor. That's exactly why I called. I completely understand. This gives your brain time to catch up. It keeps you from reacting emotionally. Disrupt. Most people aren't interested when I first call. You probably get calls like this all the time. This breaks the pattern. They were expecting you to push. When you don't, the defenses drop. And then ask. Make your request again, confidently. But the reason I'm reaching out is, would you be open to 15 minutes? Anchor. Disrupt. Ask. Practice it, role play it, make it automatic because the ability to handle rejection gracefully is a superpower that most salespeople never develop. And then number 7, remember the mantra. This is the one that separates the good from the great. 11 words that changed Jeb Blount's career, and they can change yours too. When it's time to go home, make one more call. That's it. When you're tired, when you've hit your numbers for the day, when everyone else is packing up, when every part of you wants to stop, make one more call. Because that one extra call, that's where the magic happens. That's where the deals you never expected come from. That's where the sales serendipity lives. It's not about one call. It's about who you become when you make that call. It's about building the discipline to do more than what's required. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't quit when it gets hard. One more call every day. That's the compound interest of success. That's how careers are built. That's how top performers separate themselves from everyone else. All right. There's your toolkit. 7 things. Print this out. Keep it by your desk. Reference it when you need a reminder. And most importantly, use it. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. These principles only work if you work them. So tomorrow morning, I want you to do something. Block 1 hour for prospecting. Track your numbers. Use the framework. Make the calls. And when you're tempted to stop, make one more. Do that for 30 days and your life will be different. I promise you. Now let me leave you with something. A story that Jeb tells near the end of the book. A story that for me captures everything we've talked about today. Everything about what it really takes to win. Jeb's son played football in high school. Small school. Not a lot of resources. Not the biggest kid. Not the fastest. Not the one with Division I scholarships waiting. Just a bunch of young men who loved the game and wanted to compete. Every year, they faced a rival school in what they called the backyard brawl. And this rival, they were everything Jeb's son team wasn't. Bigger, faster, stronger, better funded, better facilities, more depth on the roster. On paper, it wasn't even close. Year after year, Jeb's son's team lost. 6 years in a row. 6 years of coming up short against a team that seemed to have every advantage. 6 years of heartbreak. But this year was different, not because the team had suddenly gotten bigger or faster, not because they'd recruited some secret weapon, because of their coach, Coach Bo. Coach Bo understood something that most people don't. He understood that games aren't won on game day. They're won in the months before, in the preparation, in the practice, in the conditioning, in the mental toughness that gets forged when no one's watching. So for 3 months before that game, Coach Bo put those kids through hell. Film study, strategy session, and the sled. The blocking sled. Every practice, those kids pushed the sled over and over until their legs burned, until their lungs screamed, until every fiber of their being wanted to quit. And then they pushed it again. 6 times for every year they'd lost. 6 pushes for every 6 years of defeat to remind them of the pain, to burn it into their muscles, to make them so sick of losing that winning became the only option. Game day arrives. The rivals team shows up. Same as always, bigger, faster, confident. They'd beaten the team 6 years in a row. Why would this year be any different? But something was different. You could see it in how Jeb's son's team warmed up, in how they carried themselves, in the look in their eyes. 3 months of preparation had changed them. They weren't the same team anymore. The game is brutal, back and forth. Neither team gives an inch. Every yard is earned. Every play is a war. And as the clock winds down, the score is tied. The rival team has the ball. Final seconds. They're driving. They're in range. One more completion, and they're in field goal territory. One more play, and they win again. 7 years in a row. The quarterback drops back. He sees his receiver. He throws, and one of Jeb's son's teammates, an undersized, outmatched, outgunned defender, makes a play. He gets his hand up. He tips the ball. It falls incomplete. The crowd goes silent, and then eruption. The impossible has happened. The underdog has won. After the game, in the locker room, someone asked Coach Bo what made that difference. How did they beat a team that was better than them in every measurable way. And Coach Bo said something that Jeb has never forgotten, something that I want you to carry with you. He said, when the game was on the line, nothing they faced was harder than pushing that sled. All those months of preparation, all those brutal practices, all that suffering when no one was watching, it paid off in one moment, because when the pressure was the highest, when everything was on the line, those kids had already been through worse. The game couldn't break them. They'd already been broken and rebuilt. They were ready. And then Coach Bo asked the question that haunts me, the question I want to leave you with today. How bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? Because here's the truth about sales. Here's the truth about prospecting. Here's the truth about success in any field. It's not about talent. It's not about resources. It's not about having the best territory or the best product or the best leads. It's about how bad do you want it? The people who win are the people who are willing to do what other people won't. The people who are willing to make the calls when they're tired. The people who are willing to face rejection and keep going. The people who are willing to push the sled when everyone else has gone home. Prospecting isn't glamorous. It's not the part of sales they make movies about. It's not exciting or sexy or fun. It's hard. It's repetitive. It's emotionally draining. It's the sled. But it's also the foundation. It's the thing that separates the people who build careers from the people who flame out. It's the thing that creates the pipeline, that creates the options, that create the confidence, that creates the sales. Without it, nothing else matters. And here's the beautiful thing. It's completely within your control. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need a better territory. You don't need better leads. You don't need new CRM or a different product or a warmer market. You just need to decide. You need to decide that you want it, to decide that you're willing to do the work, to decide that starting tomorrow, you're going to be different. I think about my own journey, the kid at Movati Athletics who didn't know what he was doing, who made every mistake in the book, who let his pipeline run dry and scrambled to recover, who felt the fear of rejection and sometimes let it win. And then I think about what changed. It wasn't some magic insight. It wasn't a secret technique. It was a decision to show up every day and do the work, a decision to prospect when I didn't feel like it, a decision to push through the fear and make the call anyways, a decision to be fanatical. That decision led to becoming the top performer at Movati. That decision led to raising millions of dollars for charities across 3 countries. That decision led to building and leading teams that broke records. That decision led to everything. And it wasn't because I was special. It wasn't because I was willing to do what other. And it wasn't because I was special. It was because I was willing to do what other people wouldn't, willing to push the sled, willing to make one more call. So here's my challenge for you tomorrow morning. Not next week, not next month, tomorrow. I want you to do something different. Before you check your email, before you do anything else, block 1 hour for prospecting. Put it on your calendar right now. Make it non-negotiable. And during that hour, I want you to go all in. Phone on silent, email closed, no distraction, just you and the calls. Track everything. How many dials, how many conversations, how many appointments. See what you're actually capable of when you focus. And when that hour is up, when you've done more prospecting than you usually do in a day, I want you to feel that. I want you to remember what it's like to be in control, to be proactive instead of reactive, to be building your future instead of hoping for it. And then do it again the next day and the next and the next. 30 days from now, your pipeline will be different. 60 days from now, your confidence will be different. 90 days from now, your results will be different. Not because of luck, not because of talent, because you decided to be fanatical. That's all it takes, a decision, and then the discipline to honor that decision every single day. How bad do you want it? I want to thank you for being here today, for investing this time, for being the kind of person who seeks out wisdom and wants to get better. that says something about you, that tells me you're serious, that tells me you're one of the ones who's going to make it. If this episode hit home for you, I want you to do something. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, a colleague, a friend, someone on your team who's struggling, someone who's talented but stuck. Send them this episode. It might be the thing that changes everything for them. And if you haven't already subscribed to the Sales Evolution Lab podcast, we're just getting started. There's so much more to explore, so much more wisdom to unpack, so much more evolution ahead. This has been the Sales Evolution Lab podcast. I'm Kyle Mackie, and I'll see you in the next one.